thank you very much for joining us on the Axe and Scalpel podcast for this election preview episode. We got ourselves to let you know where we are located. We got a pretty big election coming up here in Wisconsin, and I believe we are going to be voting for a judge and a superintendent.
Super exciting positions, yes.
You know, I'm telling you, boy, the View has had just a field day with this one. It's been national.
Oh, so
kidding, of course, but it is going to be, this is going to pay some dividends for us Wisconsinites, depending on which side of the fence you may be. Would you like to dive into maybe some pros, some cons? Let's start out with Brad Schimel. He's the one that's going to be running for judge.
Yep.
What are some of the things that he's bringing to the table?
Yeah, so we've got two big roles being in this spring election here in Wisconsin, which has big implications in this state. A little bit of a bellwether for kind of post-Trump election. How are people feeling? This was a very split state, very 50-50, and it's got some big repercussions on both sides of the aisle. I know this is something. So Dr. Jakes isn't with us. He would love to talk about this, but he's doing the right thing. He went home to just have some time with his family tonight. Probably something I should be doing as well. But I want to give him props for making that priority, because that's ultimately more important than any of these things. And so we have the Supreme Court judge. So right now we have a Supreme Court in Wisconsin that is very split down the middle. We have one judge who is a swing vote, tends to lean conservative. But right now what would happen is on the 7-judge panel, if the conservative justice gets elected, there would be a 3-3 tie with a swing vote being the 7th that leans conservative. So that would be considered a win on the conservative front. If the progressive Democratic leaning candidate, so that's Susan Crawford, were to get elected, that would secure kind of a liberal majority, at least until 2028 is when the next election would be. And so this, has a lot of repercussions. So in this state where you're trying to see, legal issues and law issues being brought about for, kind of all your gender identity things, abortion, school choice, a lot of these issues that'll be brought up to the court, which way is it going to go? And it would have, big implications in this state. And so, certainly if you had a conservative, you could say, okay, we're going to try and do some things to protect the sanctity of life, limit our abortion aspects because it doesn't honor the life of the baby. You would see, maybe efforts to promote school choice so that all kids throughout the state, not just in Milwaukee, would have the ability to choose different schools, have the parents have the right to identify what's best for their kids, and to see those tax dollars go to what they are doing with their kids instead of just straight to public schools. Any legalization of marijuana might be something that would come up. Legalization of medical assistance in dying, again, an issue of morality and the sanctity of life. So there's both sides there. So you look at this issue and you say this has some very significant consequences regardless of what side you're on. If you're on the liberal side, you want to see Susan Crawford. You fear that there would be some moving backwards on some of the LGBTQ issues. You fear that there would be restrictions on abortion, that there'd be issues surrounding immigration, and a lot of the important points on the Democratic side, and see why they would fear those things. Because whereas the intent was never to have the judicial system politicized or legislate through the judicial system, we know that that's a part of it, and so it's how are they interpreting the law the law that exists. And so that's a big part. So you have Brad Schimel, you have Susan Crawford.
Now, from just the judge standpoint, based on recent voting history, which way do you think this might go? Because it used to be a left-leaning judge in Wisconsin would normally kind of win by a landslide, but I believe that gap has been closing on him. Yeah. Does this young buck have a shot here?
I think he has a shot. I haven't looked at the polls, honestly. I've gotten all the advertisements, and honestly, you hear the exact same things. Like both of them, I've seen reports that they let sex offenders go and live within so many blocks of elementary schools, and that I've seen reports about how many rape kits do they leave on. They're both currently district court judges in various districts of the state. They both, at least Schimel was a attorney general at one point, and I think had time as a prosecutor, and so they have that history, and I think it's important to think through these bigger moral issues that are that these organizations and different groups are just waiting to see.
How full has your mailbox been getting lately?
I get 3 or 4 cards a day, on both, and so it's.
Do you believe they're effective?
There's got to be some sort of effect, or else they wouldn't do it. But I mean, just think how much money is being poured in from out of state on this, because again, it creates momentum in other states. It is a sign, like that Donald Trump desperately wants wins down ballot. That there's genuine fear on both sides about where this is going. We both feel like, on both sides, we feel like our moral worldview is at stake to some extent, and so it's creating a lot of those things. But that's the thing, is it's still no guarantee. It might be more of a guarantee. We've talked in the past about how on the Democrat side there seems to be always has been this ability to close ranks and always go with things. You talk about on the Republican side here, if you have the 3 plus the swing vote, well, that's not a guarantee that you have a 4-3 majority. But and then of course you still have a governor. You still have Tony Evers in for a couple more years, and you can't necessarily overcome some of that. But it's you're talking about trying to set the future of things, of what is our trajectory, and for those of us that really believe in certain aspects. I mean, I've said in the past, and we have to line this out sometime, that there's aspects of Christian worldview in some of both sides of the aisle. But in this, where you talk about protecting human life, protecting human dignity, I think that's a side on the conservative, where we're saying, don't kill the babies, don't kill the older people off. Let's try to, help people by addressing the actual problem. We were saying let's hold on to the firm rock on the shore and try to pull people out of the drowning water. What they seem to want us to do is jump in the water with them, and then let's talk. Once we're in there, let's talk about how we bring more people into the water, and then maybe let's flood the shore up there, because we get it. It's like we're saying this. We need to hold on to the truth, that there is a truth. God created it. And at the same time, we need to be sensitive to the fact that, we got to help young women that find themselves pregnant. They didn't want to be, even if they chose to engage in sexual activity. We need to love these women. We need to encourage them to have the baby. We need to find ways to make it easier for adoption, for things. We need to find ways to support them, to help them finish school and do things and make life and be a good mom and that sort of thing. We can't just say, abortion bad.
Right.
It's why are women wanting it, and how can we how can we help them in that? Same thing. So you talk about the other big election issue is
Superintendent.
school superintendent of
And I
all of
believe
Wisconsin.
it's Brittany Kinser.
Yeah. So and I have to apologize. I don't actually know the name on the other side. But Brittany Kinzer is
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I haven't gotten any mailers from Kinser's opponent. And when it comes to those mailers, you can't always, you mentioned truth just recently, and you can't always tell what's on there is going to be true or not. But the Schimel one kind of struck me, and you might have even gotten it, but put it on the right side where it was his stand on issues. All of them said yes.
Yeah.
On the left side where it was the Crawfords, there, of course, were either no or the two glaring ones that really got my attention. The question of how many genders and late term abortions. On there, it wasn't a yes or a no, it was a no response. As a voter, does that frustrate you more than just being yes or no?
Yeah, it's like give us an answer. Even then, like how for me, so as a parent, right? I had to pull my two daughters out of the public school for a variety of reasons. I had to keep my 16-year-old autistic son in the school for other reasons because of needed services and things like that. And um, but I have the ability to do that because I make a good income, but it's the issue of like our school districts are just are the performance is tanking around the country. And it's like, well, we can just throw more money at. No, that doesn't work. It's something about what the direction we've been on, the path we've been on, and it seems like on the liberal side, it feels like they're saying we just need more of this. We need to go further down this path, and things will get better. There's been nothing to indicate to us that it will be better. Why don't we go back to the crossroads at some point in the past where academic performance was good, when we were teaching great books, reading, writing, arithmetic, not 14 different ways to solve the same math problem. Let's just put the 7 times 6 on the paper and solve the problem. I understand that some kids that's going to be harder for. But you know what? The world doesn't accommodate everything. I know you're trying to now make the world accommodate to everything. But you know what? The vast majority of kids did better, succeeded, scored well when we had what I would consider more classical education. So I care about that. What you'll see in this is you'll see this discussion that says, well, what's important to a school? And they talk about all these things except academics, right? How are we going to get test scores up? And so that's really what I care about is and that while I do very much believe that school is a place of virtue formation, because any place where you send your kids for hours a day, they're going to form that child's character. So I care very much about who are the people, what are they teaching, what are they believing, and what we find here is a significant divide on this issue where so many people that are involved in schools are very progressive and trying to teach, and we see around the country these efforts to be like, okay, this kid's having some struggle, some depression, some anxiety. Hey, do you think you might have gender confusion? And they're kind of pushing that, and we see episodes of that, as opposed to, man, this kid is struggling. We got to get them just a lot of good help and things. And that still would happen a lot in those situations, but it's like, we're going to try and force these things. And, even here in Rusk County, we had the issue of the book that was in one of the schools. It's called like Red Crayon, Blue Crayon, something like that, where it's a red crayon that believes he's a blue crayon. And it's like, even in rural conservative Rusk County, this is there. But, and that's the thing, is like, there's, at both sides, they genuinely care. I'm not saying they don't care about kids. They just have a vastly different worldview. And it comes down to who's responsible for that child? And I say it's the parents. The parents are responsible. I can give you all sorts of biblical texts, particularly like the Shema in Deuteronomy, the big prayer that they preach that says, bind these commands on your heart, teach them to your children, these things that you're supposed to raise your kids. But they're saying like, oh no, let the teachers know how to teach the kids. The parents don't know how to teach the kids. That's, you know what? I haven't taken a college course in how to teach mathematics to my kids, but guess what? I learned mathematics. I use it every day. I can show my kids some things, and it doesn't have to be all these different ways, time being spent that instead of moving on to the next level up, we're still working on trying to get every kid up to being able to solve this problem 4 different ways. And we need to be doing that. So anyway, so on the superintendent, the big things, it is those big social issues, whether they belong in schools, whether they don't, whether the school should be about education first, and then allow for moral and spiritual diversity in the schools and discussions and open discussions, and not be forcing one view or the other on the kids in the school. What we want is good academic institutions. And what you have, and what I've studied more on Brittany Kinzer, is somebody that is willing to, essentially go in and say, this isn't working. We've got to move. We got to get back to basics. We got to do some of that, and take care of that. And she's recognizing something that we're seeing around the country, is that school choice, where you have school choice, meaning that parents can take their kid to whatever school situation they want, whether it's homeschooling, private school, public school, and have the dollars follow them, to that, the money that goes right now only to the public schools, that academic performance improves for both the public schools and the private schools. Guess what? Competition breeds success. This is happening in inner city, poverty areas, wealthy areas, rural, wherever there is school choice and options, the schools tend to improve, right? Big studies over and over. And so that's one of the things that, say right now, this actually divides both parties, because it becomes not so much an ideology. It's like, all right, so in Wisconsin right now, the one place you have school choice is in Milwaukee, right? And that's because they felt like, okay, we want families to be able to move their kids to a different school for a variety of reasons. And a lot of it is inner city, poor schools. And what they find is, they started performing better. And guess what? And they said, well, if you let them go to the private classical Christian school, well, then it's only going to be the rich white kids that leave, and it's going to make the poor public schools, fail, and that sort of thing. Well, guess what? The fastest growing classical Christian school, at least in the state, if not the country, is a classical Christian school in Milwaukee that is almost entirely Black students, is from my understanding. Most of them are there on scholarship. It's not rich parents paying for it. And they're thriving, and the schools around are improved in their performance as well. And so, you run into that situation, and people are like, oh,
they don't want to hear that.
They don't want to hear that.
They don't want to hear it.
Because what happens when one kid leaves that public school, there goes $10,000, right? Well, imagine that, though. So this is rural Russ County, right? This school district, we aren't, bathing in cash and things like that. You take a kid away, $10,000 is a significant amount, right? And so, but right now, that money isn't going to any. So like when I pull my 2 daughters out, okay, the public school isn't getting those 2 things, but that money's not going to the private school. So I'm paying my taxes, and I'm paying for that education, because I believe that's the best for my daughters. And I can show you so many reasons why. But Would it be great if my tax dollars could go to that? Maybe. If it didn't come with public school, government saying, okay, yeah, you can have it, but you have to do this, 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 and this. So like our Catholic school, OLS, they do participate in some of the funding options from the school. So kids can go to OLS and OLS will get it, but they have all sorts of supervision that they have to do. That audits that cost thousands upon thousands of dollars a year that they have to go through. Some curriculum limitations. It really does kind of limit some of the religious stuff there, and so, and so what I would really hope, and this is just my personal opinion, if you'd elect a state school superintendent that would push for school choice, and the opposing candidate is Jill Underly. She's the incumbent. Look this up. She's the incumbent superintendent, and so again, when I look at it, it's mostly about social ideology things that she's talking about, not so much about here's how we're going to actually improve our test scores, other than we need more money. And like, don't let the kids go to school choice. Don't let the kids go to school choice. And and you see even efforts like here that will say, okay, if they're going to homeschool, but those parents now have to attend so many courses, they have to do this and that, they have to report in, their kids have to take this test and all that. And if they don't, then they can't homeschool. The kids need to be forcefully returned back to public school, that sort of thing. So
are these 4-year terms, both positions?
Superintendent. I don't know. I should know. I should have looked that up. So I don't want to speak on it because I don't know.
But either way, for the most part, if you happen to vote for Donald Trump, let's just say,
yeah,
and you want to continue the momentum of the things that he wants to do to get this country better, to get our teachers better, to get our rulings better, more fair, more common sense, this is part of it. This is part of the things that he says to do. We have to elect the right people in our individual states to accomplish a lot of the things that he says that he wants to give a lot of control to the states. And this is one of the examples that he means by it. Is now it's kind of up to us to make sure that our state is going to go in the direction that God would really like to see it go, along with its citizens. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, they say whether God would want it. I have my take on if it's what God would want.
Right.
Based upon, again, what I know of God. But I would say, yeah, it is. And I think this is the way it was supposed to be. States' rights and do it, but also ultimately comes down to the individual and the parents and saying, I am responsible for my kids, and I want to be able to make sure they get educated both academically and morally for a successful life, that they can pursue that full life that I know comes through faith alone and Christ alone. And I, therefore, want to exert my right to control what and when they are exposed to things that would deviate from that. It doesn't mean that they won't ever be. We need to do that. So, talk about public school. I was a public school kid. My dad was a teacher. He was an administrator. For a long time, I was big. Public school. We got to get kids, even Christian kids, in there. They need to be witnesses of the truth. And then, as a parent, what I see is I can't overcome the 8 hours a day of this other, the behaviors of other kids, the some of the moral things. And I don't want to say it's all bad, because there are amazing people in the schools, teachers, administrators. They have a hard job. I don't want that job. And most of them are trying. And even in our area, I'd say the majority are probably on the more conservative side. But a lot of it comes down to, like, you're an employee. You got to toe the company line on things, and the rules are coming down. You got to act them out. We need to say, enough is enough. I would love for the public schools to get back to being an academic standard of excellence, morally neutral on these social issues where, Christian faith is allowed to be expressed, to be valued along with people with other views, side by side, that you're not going to get canceled or talked down to, for those things. It would be great if it were a safe environment for all kids, and it's just not. So with that, I think, I would say, go out, vote your conscience, look at the candidates, try to find out what you can find out. God bless you, whatever you decide. There is no party that's got the market cornered on mercy and goodness entirely. But I say, man, we got to exercise your right to vote. It's not a November election; it's an April 1st election, and that ain't no joke.
No. Is this called Politicuts?
No.
Should we call this Politicuts?
We'll see if
get out there and vote.
Can get Jake to contribute, but whether this comes out the day before, a few days before, we'll see. We just wanted to just encourage everyone to vote, to learn a little bit and to know why these are important issues. So with that, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you. May he bring you peace as you cast your vote on April 1st. God bless.